LA fires could take off again, fire chief warns, with high winds expected. The sun rose over Los Angeles, casting an orange glow across the skyline. It would have been a perfect morning if not for the looming threat that had gripped the city. For weeks, the Santa Ana winds were expected to return, and with them came the terrifying possibility of the wildfires raging out of control once more. A city on edge. A city on edge. It had been 2 weeks since the first flames erupted in the hills above Los Angeles. Dubbed the Griffith Fire, the inferno had already consumed over 40,000 acres, destroying homes and displacing thousands. For the residents of LA, the air was thick with smoke, and anxiety ran high. The fire started on a dry, windy afternoon in late October, a time of year when Southern California braced itself for the Santa Ana winds. These fierce gusts, often exceeding 60 miles per hour, were notorious for turning small brush fires into raging infernos. When the first reports of smoke came in, firefighters rushed to Griffith Park, a sprawling urban wilderness that had been bone dry after months of relentless heat. Despite their best efforts, the fire spread with astonishing speed, jumping fire breaks and defying containment. By the second day, the fire had forced evacuations in nearby neighborhoods. Families packed what they could into cars, fleeing with pets, photo albums, and hastily assembled bags of essentials. The highways were choked with traffic as people tried to escape the encroaching flames. Local news stations broadcast continuous coverage, their footage showing a wall of fire consuming everything in its path. Helicopters dumped water and fire retardant, but the flames seemed insatiable. For those who stayed behind, life took on an apocalyptic quality. The sky was an eerie orange during the day and pitch black at night, illuminated only by the glow of the fire on the horizon. Ash rained down like snow, coating cars, sidewalks, and rooftops. Breathing became a struggle, even indoors, as the smell of smoke permeated everything. Schools closed, businesses shuttered, and the city seemed to hold its collective breath. Amid the chaos, stories of resilience and heroism emerged. Firefighters worked around the clock, battling exhaustion and dangerous conditions. Volunteer groups sprang up, collecting donations for evacuees and offering shelter to those displaced. Social media was flooded with posts from residents coordinating supplies, sharing evacuation tips, and checking in on neighbors. One such story was that of Maria Delgado, a single mother of 2 who lived in a modest home on the edge of the evacuation zone. When the fire threatened her neighborhood, Maria initially refused to leave, worried about looters targeting empty homes. But as the flames crept closer, she realized she had no choice. Gathering her children, their dog, and a few cherished belongings, Maria drove to a community center turned evacuation shelter. There, she found solace in the kindness of strangers who shared food, blankets, and words of encouragement. Meanwhile, in the heart of the city, emergency responders faced logistical nightmares. Hospitals prepared for an influx of patients suffering from smoke inhalation and burns. Power outages complicated their efforts, forcing some to rely on backup generators. Animal shelters overflowed with pets rescued from abandoned homes. The city's homeless population, already vulnerable, struggled to find safe places to escape. The worsening air quality. The Griffith Fire also brought the climate crisis into sharp focus. Scientists and environmentalists pointed to the unusually intense fire season as a symptom of a warming planet. Drought conditions, exacerbated by record-breaking temperatures, had left vegetation tinder dry, providing ample fuel for the blaze. Activists called for immediate action, urging policymakers to prioritize renewable energy, water conservation, and sustainable urban planning. As the fire raged on, local leaders sought to maintain a sense of order. Mayor Alicia Nguyen held daily press conferences, providing updates and reassuring the public. "We will get through this," she declared, her voice resolute despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. "Our firefighters, first responders, and community members are working tirelessly to protect lives and property. We ask everyone to remain vigilant and follow evacuation orders." But not everyone heeded those orders. In the affluent hills of Laurel Canyon, some residents refused to leave their multi-million-dollar homes, hiring private firefighters to protect their properties. This decision sparked controversy, with critics arguing that it highlighted the city's stark economic inequalities. While wealthy homeowners had the resources to safeguard their assets, others were left to rely on overwhelmed public services. As the days stretched into weeks, containment efforts showed slow progress. Firefighters gained ground in some areas, only to lose it in others as shifting winds fanned the flames. The battle was grueling and relentless, taking a toll on those on the front lines. Some firefighters suffered injuries, while others pushed through fatigue, driven by a sense of duty and camaraderie. Among them was Captain Liam O'Connor, a 20-year veteran of the Los Angeles Fire Department. Known for his calm demeanor under pressure, Liam led his crew with unwavering determination. On one particularly harrowing night, his team managed to save an apartment complex that had been directly in the fire's path. "We're just doing our job," he said humbly when interviewed by a local reporter. "But it's the support from the community that keeps us going." In the midst of the destruction, small miracles brought glimmers of hope. A group of wildlife rescuers managed to save several animals trapped in Griffith Park, including a family of deer and a rare California condor. A firefighter's body camera captured the moment when a terrified cat emerged from the smoke, leaping into his arms. The video went viral, symbolizing resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. As the fire's reach extended, it disrupted daily life far beyond the immediate danger zones. The entertainment industry, a cornerstone of LA's economy, halted productions as studios prioritized employee safety. Popular tourist destinations, including the Griffith Observatory and the Los Angeles Zoo, closed indefinitely. The city's bustling nightlife came to a standstill, with smoky air and evacuation orders keeping people indoors. For many Angelenos, the fire became a test of endurance. Clara Martinez, an ER nurse working double shifts at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, described the emotional toll. "We're seeing so many patients affected by the smoke, and it's heartbreaking," she said. "But it's also amazing to see how people come together in times like this. The support from the community has been incredible." The Griffith Fire was a reminder of the city's vulnerability, but it also showcased its resilience. Communities organized donation drives, distributed masks, and opened their homes to those in need. Musicians held virtual benefit concerts to raise funds for recovery efforts. Local artists created murals honoring firefighters and first responders, turning charred walls into symbols of hope. By the third week, a combination of cooler weather and strategic firefighting efforts began to turn the tide. Containment lines held and evacuation orders were gradually lifted. Residents returned to their neighborhoods to assess the damage, finding both heartbreak and relief. Some homes were reduced to rubble, while others miraculously stood unscathed. The recovery process would be long and arduous, but the city was determined to rebuild. In the aftermath, the Griffith Fire left an indelible mark on Los Angeles. It was a stark reminder of the challenges posed by a changing climate and the importance of community solidarity in the face of disaster. For those who lived through it, the fire would forever be etched in memory as a time when the city, despite its divisions, came together to protect what mattered most. As the first rains of the season finally fell, extinguishing the last embers, Angelenos looked to the future with cautious optimism. The hills above Los Angeles, once ablaze, were now blackened and scarred. But amidst the charred landscape, new shoots of green began to emerge, a testament to nature's resilience and the enduring spirit of a city on edge. It had been 2 weeks since the first flames erupted in the hills above Los Angeles. Dubbed the Griffith Fire, the inferno had already consumed over 40,000 acres, destroying homes and displacing thousands. For the residents of LA, the air was thick with smoke, and anxiety ran high. Fire Chief Alejandro Vargas stood at the edge of a blackened canyon, his face grim as he surveyed the devastation. A seasoned veteran of wildfire management, Vargas had seen fires burn hotter and faster than anyone thought possible. Yet, even he couldn't shake the sense of unease. The winds are going to be our biggest enemy, Vargas told a gathering of reporters that morning. With the Santa Anas expected to pick up, this fire could take off again. We're asking everyone to stay vigilant and be prepared to evacuate at a moment's notice. Among the crowd was journalist Rachel Meyer, who had been covering the fire since it began. She noted Vargas's uncharacteristic tone, normally calm under pressure. His voice carried an urgency that sent a chill down her spine. The warning. The Santa Ana winds were a phenomenon that Southern Californians knew all too well. Dry, hot, and fast-moving, they could turn a small brush fire into a wall of flames in minutes. For days, meteorologists had been tracking the winds, warning of their potential to reignite embers buried in the ash. Residents like Tom and Elena Ramirez had been living in a state of limbo. Their home in the foothills of Glendale was dangerously close to the fire's edge. The couple had already packed their car with essentials, family photos, important documents, and their 2 golden retrievers. "We've been through fires before, but this one feels different," Elena said as she loaded bottled water into the trunk. "The air is so dry, and you can smell the smoke even with the windows closed. It's like the fire is just waiting to pounce." Their neighbor, an elderly man named Harold, refused to leave. "I've lived here for 50 years, he said stubbornly. "This house is my life. I'm not going anywhere." A city mobilizes as the winds began to pick up that afternoon. The city's emergency response team sprang into action. What had started as a relatively contained wildfire in the hills to the west had, within hours, become a ravenous inferno threatening the edges of the urban sprawl. The dry conditions, combined with the unusually strong winds, created a perfect storm for the flames to spread rapidly. Smoke billowed into the sky, a dark plume visible for miles, casting an ominous shadow over the city. The mayor had already declared a state of emergency earlier in the day, and the city's disaster response plan was activated. At the Emergency Operations Center, the atmosphere was tense but organized. Large monitors displayed real-time updates of the fire's progression, overlaid with maps of evacuation zones and critical infrastructure. Fire chiefs, police commanders, medical professionals, and city officials huddled around tables strewn with charts and radios, coordinating their next moves. "We need more resources along the northern ridge." Chief Daniels, the city's fire marshal, barked into his radio. "The fire's moving faster than anticipated. Get those engines deployed now." Firefighters from across the state had been deployed, creating fire breaks and dousing hotspots. It was a monumental effort that required precise coordination. Convoys of fire trucks, water tenders, and bulldozers rumbled through the streets toward the fire line. The smell of smoke hung heavy in the air, mingling with the acrid scent of burning vegetation. At the same time, helicopters buzzed overhead, dropping water and fire retardant on areas too dangerous to reach by foot. Each drop was a carefully calculated maneuver, requiring pilots to navigate through thick smoke and turbulent winds. In the neighborhoods closest to the advancing fire, evacuation orders were issued. Police cruisers moved through the streets with sirens blaring, officers using loudspeakers to urge residents to leave immediately. Volunteers went door to door, helping elderly residents and those with disabilities to pack up and get out. At the same time, shelters were set up in schools, community centers, and churches. Local businesses donated supplies, from bottled water to blankets, as volunteers worked tirelessly to prepare for the influx of evacuees. At one such shelter, Maria Hernandez, a nurse who had just finished a double shift at the hospital, found herself coordinating medical care for dozens of people. "We're going to need more inhalers and oxygen tanks," she told a Red Cross volunteer. Many evacuees were already showing signs of respiratory distress from the smoke. "And make sure anyone with asthma or COPD gets seen right away." Meanwhile, the city's transportation department was working to manage traffic flow. Highways leading out of the city were clogged with cars as residents fled. Electronic billboards flashed evacuation routes, and traffic lights were reprogrammed to keep vehicles moving steadily. Public buses were repurposed to ferry residents who didn't have access to private transportation. At the same time, the local transit authority coordinated with neighboring cities to provide additional resources and assistance. Back at the fire line, the situation grew increasingly dire. Flames leapt high into the air, consuming everything in their path. Trees exploded as their sap superheated, sending embers flying. Firefighters worked in grueling 12-hour shifts, battling exhaustion as much as the flames. They wore heavy protective gear that left them drenched in sweat, their faces smeared with soot. "Watch that tree," someone yelled, just as a towering pine collapsed in a shower of sparks. A crew barely managed to dodge out of the way, their faces pale despite the heat. Nearby, a bulldozer operator worked tirelessly to carve out a firebreak, the massive machine churning through dirt and debris. Every inch gained felt like a small victory in an otherwise overwhelming battle. The air support teams faced their own challenges. Pilots flew low over the fire, their visibility reduced to almost nothing by the thick smoke. They relied on ground crews to guide them, their radios crackling with updates. "Target the ridge line," one ground commander directed. "If we lose that, the fire will sweep straight into the suburbs." In one particularly precarious maneuver, a helicopter hovered over a reservoir to refill its water tank. The pilot fought to keep the aircraft steady as the wind threatened to push it off course. Once loaded, the helicopter rose quickly, heading back toward the inferno. A few moments later, its payload was released, a torrent of water cascading down to extinguish a line of flames threatening a row of homes. Even as first responders fought to contain the blaze, the community's resilience began to shine through. Local restaurants cooked meals for firefighters and evacuees, while residents organized donation drives for essentials like clothes, toiletries, and pet supplies. Social media became a lifeline for many, with people sharing information about missing loved ones, safe evacuation routes, and ways to help. At a small animal shelter on the city's outskirts, volunteers worked around the clock to care for displaced pets. "We've taken in over 100 animals in the last 24 hours, said Emily Carter, the shelter's director. "Dogs, cats, rabbits, even a couple of goats. It's chaotic, but we'll make it work." In the midst of the chaos, stories of heroism and compassion emerged. A group of teenagers formed a makeshift rescue team, helping to evacuate animals from homes that had been abandoned in the rush to escape. A retired firefighter came out of retirement to assist with logistics, using his years of experience to guide younger crews. And a local radio host stayed on air for 36 hours straight, providing updates and words of encouragement to listeners. As night fell, the fire continued to burn, its orange glow visible against the dark sky. But the efforts of the city's emergency response teams and its residents had not been in vain. The fire breaks held in key areas, preventing the flames from reaching critical infrastructure. Evacuation centers reported that nearly everyone in the danger zones had been accounted for. And while the battle was far from over, there was a growing sense of hope that the city would endure. By the second day, reinforcements began to arrive. Fire crews from neighboring states joined the fight, bringing additional equipment and manpower. The National Guard deployed troops to assist with evacuations and roadblocks, freeing up local law enforcement to focus on other tasks. A fleet of larger aircraft, including a DC-10 air tanker, was called in to conduct massive water drops, helping to slow the fire's advance. At the command center, a new strategy was being devised. "We've got a 12-hour window before the wind shifts again," Chief Daniels said during a briefing. "Let's use it to our advantage. Focus on containment lines and protecting structures." The plan was ambitious but necessary. Crews worked tirelessly to execute it, their efforts bolstered by the knowledge that every small victory brought the city closer to safety. Slowly but surely, the fire's advance began to slow. By the third day, containment lines had been established around much of the blaze. While hotspots and flare-ups remained a concern, the immediate threat to the city had been mitigated. In the aftermath, the community rallied to support those who had lost their homes and businesses. Fundraisers were organized, and local contractors offered their services to help rebuild. At the same time, city officials began assessing the damage and planning for the future. "This won't be the last wildfire we face," the mayor said during a press conference, "but it's a testament to our strength and unity that we came through this together." For many, the memory of those harrowing days would linger, but so too would the stories of courage and kindness, a reminder that even in the face of disaster, a city can come together to protect and support one another. And as the winds finally died down and the skies began to clear, the people of the city could look forward to rebuilding, stronger and more united than ever before. As the winds began to pick up that afternoon, the city's emergency response teams sprang into action. Firefighters from across the state had been deployed, creating fire breaks and dousing hotspots. Helicopters buzzed overhead, dropping water and fire retardant on areas too dangerous to reach by foot. Vargas coordinated efforts from the command center, where maps of the fire's trajectory were updated hourly. "We've got teams working around the clock," he said during a briefing. "But with these winds, we're going to need all the help we can get." Volunteers flocked to evacuation centers, bringing supplies and offering support to displaced families. Local businesses donated food and clothing, and schools opened their gyms as temporary shelters. Yet, amidst the outpouring of goodwill, the tension was palpable. Everyone knew the winds could change everything in an instant. The spark by nightfall, the winds were howling. In the Griffith Park area, where firefighters had managed to contain most of the flames, a single spark, possibly from a downed power line, ignited a new blaze. Within minutes, the fire roared to life, driven by 60-mile-per-hour gusts. Rachel Meyer, who had been following a fire crew, found herself in the thick of it. "It's like the fire has a mind of its own," she said into her camera as embers rained down. "The wind is pushing it so fast, there's no time to react." Residents in the area scrambled to evacuate. Tom and Elena Ramirez grabbed their dogs and joined the line of cars snaking down the mountain. Harold, their stubborn neighbor, finally relented when flames appeared on the horizon. The front lines. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke, swirling through the night like a dark shroud. Flames licked hungrily at the edges of a forest, casting an eerie orange glow that painted the scene in hues of desperation and urgency. Firefighters worked tirelessly, their silhouettes darting between fire engines and burning vegetation like shadowy figures in a chaotic dance. It was a battle against nature's fury, one that demanded every ounce of strength, courage, and determination. Vargas, the station captain, was in the thick of it. His helmet was smudged with soot, and his face bore streaks of ash and sweat. He moved with the precision of a man who had spent decades on the front lines of infernos like this one. "Every second counts," he shouted, his voice barely audible, over the roar of the flames and the hum of engines. His team, a mix of seasoned veterans and rookies, responded with practiced efficiency, their movements a testament to the rigorous training that had prepared them for this moment. The blaze had started 3 days ago, sparked by an unseasonably dry lightning storm. It spread rapidly, fueled by gusty winds and parched vegetation. Now it threatened a small cluster of homes on the edge of town. For the residents who had fled hours earlier, the firefighters were their last hope. Among the crew was Sarah Kim, a firefighter known for her unwavering dedication and resilience. She had been on duty for 72 hours straight, catching brief moments of rest in the cab of the engine or on the hard ground whenever she could. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her muscles ached with the kind of exhaustion that only comes from pushing the human body to its limits. But she refused to falter. As she aimed a high-pressure hose at the encroaching flames, Sarah's thoughts drifted to her family. Her 2 young daughters, Lily and Mia, were likely asleep by now, unaware of the danger their mother faced. Her husband, David, would be up, glued to the news, hoping for updates and praying for her safety. The thought of their faces gave her strength. "We're not just fighting a fire," she muttered under her breath, her words drowned by the noise around her. "We're fighting to save lives." The heat was unbearable, a relentless force that seemed to seep into their very bones. Embers rained down like fiery snowflakes, and the crackling of burning wood was punctuated by the occasional groan of a tree succumbing to the flames. The team's protective gear offered some shielding, but it was far from impervious. Sweat pooled beneath their helmets and soaked through their clothes, making every movement a test of endurance. As the crew worked to contain the fire, Vargas kept a watchful eye on the shifting winds. He knew how unpredictable fires could be, how quickly they could change course and trap even the most experienced firefighters. He carried the weight of responsibility not just for the mission, but for the safety of his team. His radio crackled to life with updates from other units battling the fire on different fronts. Resources were stretched thin, and reinforcements were hours away. "Vargas, we've got a hotspot flaring up near Sector 3, came the voice of a fellow captain. "Copy that," Vargas replied, signaling to a group of firefighters to move to the new location. Sarah was among them. She adjusted her hose and joined the others in a coordinated effort to douse the flames threatening to leap across a fire break. It was grueling work, requiring precision and teamwork. At one point, a sudden gust of wind sent a wall of fire racing toward them. "Pull back!" Vargas shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The team retreated to a safer position, their hearts pounding as the fire consumed the ground they had just been standing on. It was a sobering reminder of the thin line between safety and disaster. Hours passed, though they felt like an eternity. The crew's progress was slow but steady. They managed to push the fire back from the homes, creating a perimeter that held against the advancing flames. But the battle was far from over. During a brief lull, Sarah took a moment to catch her breath. She leaned against the fire engine, her body heavy with fatigue. Vargas approached her, his expression a mix of concern and admiration. "You holding up?" he asked, handing her a bottle of water. Sarah nodded, taking a grateful sip. "I'll be fine. Just thinking about my girls. They're the reason I'm here." Vargas smiled faintly. "They've got a hell of a role model. But don't forget to take care of yourself too. We need you in one piece." The words resonated with Sarah. She had always prided herself on her ability to push through adversity. But moments like this reminded her of the importance of balance. She nodded again, steeling herself for the hours ahead. As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight broke through the smoke-filled sky, casting a pale light over the scorched landscape. It was a small but significant victory. The fire's intensity waned as cooler morning temperatures and rising humidity slowed its advance. The team seized the opportunity to reinforce their lines and extinguish remaining hotspots. In the end, the cluster of homes was spared, thanks to the relentless efforts of Vargas, Sarah, and the rest of the crew. The fire was still burning in other areas, but for now, this part of the battle was won. As Sarah walked back to the staging area, she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Exhaustion, relief, and pride mingled in a way that was both overwhelming and grounding. She thought of her daughters again, of their innocent smiles and the hugs she'd give them when she finally made it home. For Sarah, and for every firefighter on the front lines, the job was more than just a profession. It was a calling, a commitment to protect and serve, no matter the cost. Vargas watched as his team regrouped, their faces etched with weariness, but also with a quiet determination. He knew the fight was far from over. There would always be another fire, another crisis demanding their skills and bravery. But for now, they had earned a moment of respite, a chance to breathe and to honor the unbreakable spirit that kept them going in the face of unimaginable odds. Firefighters worked tirelessly through the night, their faces streaked with ash and sweat. Vargas himself joined a crew battling the blaze near a cluster of homes. "Every second counts," he shouted, as they aimed hoses at the encroaching flames. One firefighter, Sarah Kim, had been on duty for 72 hours straight. Exhausted but determined, she thought of her own family waiting for her at home. "We're not just fighting a fire," she said. "We're fighting to save lives." The aftermath: by morning, the winds had died down, but the damage was done. Over 10,000 acres had burned overnight, and dozens of homes were reduced to rubble. Miraculously, no lives were lost, thanks to the quick action of firefighters and the evacuation efforts. Rachel Meyer filed her report, capturing the resilience, of a city united in the face of disaster. This fire tested us in ways we never imagined, she wrote. But it also showed the strength of our community. Together, we will rebuild. As for Vargas, he stood once again at the edge of the canyon, surveying the smoldering landscape. The winds may have won this round, he said quietly, but we'll be ready for the next.